Hi everybody, this is Miguel. In this video we're going to have an interview with John Julius Reel from Spanglish in a Minute. Hola a todos, soy Miguel. En este video vamos a tener una entrevista con John Julius Reel de Spanglish in a Minute. Ya en una ocasión anterior habíamos contado con la presencia de John Julius Reel en un video en el cual estábamos hablando acerca de procesos de aprendizaje de inglés. En esta ocasión contamos de nuevo con su compañía para un video que es una entrevista. Es un video de cerca de 1 hora, es una entrevista en la cual hablamos acerca de el proceso de John en España para aprender el español, su vida en España, sus proyectos como escritor, porque el hombre es escritor, tiene 2 libros a su haber, siendo el más reciente My Half Orange, A Story of Love and Language in Seville, algo así como Mi Media Naranja, una historia de amor e idiomas en Sevilla. Les recuerdo por favor que si les gusta este video, denle like, compártanlo con sus amigos y si aún no lo han hecho, suscríbanse al canal para apoyar la creación de más contenidos que puedan ayudarles en su proceso de aprendizaje. Y de hecho, este es uno de esos contenidos, porque se trata de una entrevista de 1 hora más, son como 55 minutos más o menos, casi 1 hora, en la cual conversamos un montón de cosas, John y yo, y la entrevista es toda en inglés. Es interesante porque ustedes podrán escuchar un hablante nativo, que es John Julius Reel, y un hablante no nativo, que soy yo. Podrán mirar muchas diferencias, obviamente, en acento, pronunciación, formación de frases, etcétera, pero es un ejercicio muy importante de listening comprehension, así que esa es la idea detrás de este video, que ustedes aprovechen este proceso como un ejercicio de listening comprehension, además pues de conocer un poco más acerca de la vida y proyectos de John Julius Reel. He habilitado los subtítulos para que puedan apoyarse en ellos eventualmente. Si quieren tomarlo como un apoyo, ya saben cuál es la idea: escuchar, básicamente tratar de entender, tomar nota de vocabulario, palabras que no conozcan, expresiones nuevas, que de hecho hay un par de expresiones que me llaman la atención y las mencionamos en el video. Y después, si necesitan apoyarse en los subtítulos, hacerlo como para verificar, así mira, yo estaba claro en lo que me estaban diciendo, etcétera, etcétera. Pero es un ejercicio muy bueno para practicar. Así que, sin más preámbulos, los dejo con la entrevista con John Julius Reel. I'm here with my friend John Julius Reel. First, I would like to apologize if perhaps I have some mistakes with my English, if my English is broken maybe. But then, again, this is going to be a conversation with my friend John Julius. We're going to talk about some of his background and his current projects. And this could, must, and should be used as a listening comprehension exercise for those who are following both our channels and our social media. So, for those who don't know about John, John is a New Yorker who has been, as if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, who has been living in Spain since 2005. He's the writer, co-author, and editor of El Derby Final, the Final Derby, and he's written 2 books. The first one was ¿Qué pinto yo aquí? Un neoyorquino en la ciudad de nunca jamás, which should be something like What am I doing here? A New Yorker in the city of Neverland. And his most recent work, My Half Orange, A Story of Love and Language in Sevilla. Seville would be the word in English? Seville?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
He's also professor, teacher of composition and conversational English, content creator on YouTube and Instagram with great success, and his channels, Spanglish in a Minute, which is awesome. I love it. And Book Rants, in which he speaks about books, and it's like a review channel for books. So, John.
Yes.
What can you tell us about you and your current projects?
Well, first, I want to thank you for inviting me to talk on your channel, Miguel. I have the same admiration for you. I love people who produce content with regularity and do it in, I would say, a humanitarian way. You want to help people. And if you earn a little bit of money in the process, great. but your initial motive is to share what you know with other people. So I admire that very much in you, and I think we share that desire to share what we know with other people. So yeah, I mean, I came to Spain in 2005 wanting to learn Spanish. That was my goal, that was my objective. I thought that I would learn Spanish in a year, return to New York City, and that way New York, which is very, very Latin, I'm sure you probably even have some followers who live there. It's a very, very Latin city, a lot of Latinos, Latinas, and there's a whole sort of side of New York City that was in many ways closed to me because I was a typical white bread white man, and I wanted to open up this very exciting, exotic side of New York. So I was, after a year in Spain, I realized that a year was not enough for me to learn.
Yeah, I would like to interrupt you with two things. The first one is, I was thinking about that. Did you realize that perhaps 1 year was not going to be enough? Did you ever think about staying there and making a living there for good? Because it's basically what you did.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a great question, Miguel, because very often people complain in Spain about how bad the language learning is, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is in the United States. The idea that you can learn a language quickly in 3 months is just basically a general idea in the United States. It's thought to be easier than it is. And that was, I thought that I could easily learn a language in a year.
That's a marketing idea, basically.
It is, and it's a lie. I mean, it's a false lie. I mean, look, there are some people who are very, very, I won't say intelligent, because it's a specific skill they have. They have a specific skill to learn languages. Yes, it's a skill or an ability. Now, I don't have that skill. I consider myself intelligent. I love to read, but my skill is basically hard work. I think I have a natural ability to learn languages. And I think I was under the impression that it was much easier than it is. And I think people have to be very, very clear, or have to understand that if you decide that you want to learn a language, you have to commit 3 years of your life, at least, every day. We can talk about this because I hope we do another video, you and I, talking about your story. Because your story is very similar. I mean, you're kind of forced to learn the language.
Not really. It's gonna be interesting, and I'm sure, and I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be stuff for another video. But I started when I was 13 years old here in Colombia, and only until I was 31, I got the opportunity to get to the States. But wow. I love the language, trying to learn on my own, blah blah blah. But anyways, so that would be an interesting video if we can do that later in the future.
In 1994, I went to France for 3 months, and in 1994, I probably had intermediate level of French.
With the idea of improving your skills with French?
Yes. At first, I was 26 at the time. And my idea was first to learn French. And I had a good level and I had a good start, but I just didn't practice it. And if you don't practice a language, it disappears.
Yeah.
And really, French is not as useful a language for an American. I mean, America is the United States, Mexico, all the countries below that, Canada. I mean, French is important in Canada, but it's not. I mean, there's a whole part of the United States. I mean, if you live in Miami,
would it be accurate saying that in the United States, English, Spanish, and maybe Chinese?
I think so, and I think there's some debate about whether or not people speak more Spanish than English. I think every day it's closer to the number of people who speak native speakers. I'm not exactly sure, but I know the statistics are always changing. Yes, I don't really know the statistics very well. But anyway, to answer your question, after 1 year, I knew it wasn't enough. And then after that, relatively soon after that, I met the woman who would become my wife. And she is my half orange, mi media naranja.
Yep.
And so the book that was published on April 18th, I mean, I have it here, but it's really kind of you can't really see it because it's backwards.
I know.
It's called My
In the edition, I'll put a better image of your book and links to your website and everything. Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. And so it really, very often I was lucky. I mean, very often you get lucky in life. I've been very lucky in life, Miguel, but I've been very lucky with my wife.
Chance favors the prepared minds.
Say that again?
Chance favors the prepared minds.
Yes, good, yeah, okay, yes. Chance being like luck or opportunity. That's a great word, chance, for those people who are listening. Because, yeah. But yeah, and so I was prepared to work hard. And with my wife, I sort of fell in love with her as I fell in love with the language, as I fell in love with Seville, Spain, as I fell in love with Andalusia. And I think also you kind of have to love everything around the language to really
culture, of course,
to really, yeah. I mean, I know you have some interests in American rock music, American hardcore music. I'm sure a lot of your interests in the language comes from your cultural interests,
music and movies at first.
And movies,
yeah. Then I made friends with a girl from the United States, in pen pal. That was the sending letters back then.
Yeah,
I'm talking 1984.
Yeah,
so go figure. Yeah, it was not just a matter of learning the language per se, but going further.
Exactly. You have to go further. You have to enjoy it. I mean, if you enjoy a language, you just learn it so much more quickly. Not as quickly as the lying marketers want to tell you, but
in 3 months.
You can't learn it in 3 months unless you're a certain type of genius.
You can learn to repeat words, sentences maybe, but that's not communication. That's not real communication.
Exactly. That's sort of the lie, right?
Yeah.
Like if they say, I can speak Spanish. I can say, me llamo John. That's speaking Spanish, but that's not having a conversation.
If that's the case, I speak like 10, 12 languages because I can say, das vidania, danka, arigato gozaimasu, blah, blah, blah. And I can just repeat sentences in different languages. Some perhaps make sense, but that's it. And it's not real conversation. It's not real communication.
That's right. And so, my vocation has always been to write. I've always wanted to write since I graduated from high school.
You're 1 year studying in Sevilla, right?
Right.
Then you realize you need more. You need to stay longer. So you need to start thinking about, of course, making a living somehow. Keep on studying.
Right.
So,
that was easy for me.
How did it work?
Because look, I'm lucky also because I'm an American. I mean, it's not difficult for me to be an immigrant. I'm from the United States, so they welcomed me and they welcomed the ability. I mean, I'm a university professor. I have a great knowledge of English, so it was very easy for me to get work at first illegally. And then once I married my wife, I became legal. So
that's a strong word, don't you think?
What's that?
That's a strong word. Legal, illegal, when it comes to being part of a different society or a culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there was the
risk. I know that's the word, but it's kind of
it's a harsh word.
Yeah, it is.
And I was willing to risk it because if I was discovered, I would be sent home and I would be not allowed in Spain for 10 years. But again, that's a rule in many ways in place to keep out people they don't want. I mean, if I'm in the country and I'm spending money, I don't think there was much of a risk for me, you know? And then once I began to teach English, I enjoyed it. And I think I became a better teacher of English, conversational English, because I was struggling so hard to learn Spanish.
If I'm not mistaken, you were and you are also very active in your community, right? Because I've seen you being part of radio shows.
Yes.
I've seen some videos of, I don't know if it's like live shows there also, in which you tell jokes, they invite you and speak about different things. So
yes. Well, partially that, when I came to Spain, I think it was 2009.
And you've been in a movie too.
I've been in a film. I acted in a film.
Yeah.
Correct. So yeah, in 2008, I think well, this is the story, and this is what sort of the book is about. When my first son was born in 2008, when he was born, the doctors took him away from us and put him in an incubator because his glucose was low.
Okay.
And I remember not understanding the doctors. And I felt like, okay, I have to really, really learn Spanish if I'm going to raise a family here and defend a family in Spain. So I'm at that point, although I love books, although I love to write, I made a promise to myself that I am not going to read, I am not going to write in English for 5 years.
Oh.
I'm only going to read and write in Spanish. So from that point on...
That was in what year?
2008, my son was born.
Did you keep your promise?
I did.
Wow.
I did. And in fact, after a year with my writings, I said, well, I want to do something.
Not even with your family in the United States?
Of course I did that. But I mean, with my hobbies. My hobbies are, I love to read and I love to write. I wrote every day. I write every day. That's what I do, and I read every day. But I'm talking about books.
Okay.
So I started to write every day in Spanish. And I sent those articles to the local newspaper, Diario de Sevilla, as a lark, really. And they accepted them for publication. And they asked me to do a series of articles. So really, that was the beginning of my...
May I ask what were the articles about?
It was called La Sevilla del Guiri. Now, for those of you in South America, Guiri is the Spanish word for gringo. And so it's basically the Seville of the gringo. And so I wrote about what it was like to live in Seville, not in the center of Seville, but really on the outskirts of Seville. And that's where raising kids half the time, being a stay-at-home dad. And then, that led to the book. And then the book led to interviews with me. And I am very comfortable in front of a camera. I just am comfortable in front of a camera. And so they invited me to the radio. And then the guy who interviewed me in the newspaper became the director of the local radio station. And so he invited me to start working at the radio station. So one of my jobs is to participate in 3 radio programs during the week. And so that's part of how I earn my living. So that's how I've become sort of like I'm a minor public figure in Seville.
It couldn't be better for you.
Oh yeah, because look, Miguel, I meet all these famous people. I meet these great flamenco artists. I go to different parts of Andalusia. I'm really, really immersed in the culture. And so I wanted to celebrate that. I wanted to with my book. I want to talk about other things, but my book is basically about, it's about how I assimilated into Spain. I'm sorry.
When you say your book, you're meaning your first or the second book?
Well, both. They're really sort of the same thing, but I would say the first book is written for Spanish people who live in Seville, And the second book is written for a different audience, people who don't know anything about Spain, and it's a better book. It's more complete. The story is more complete.
The first one was published in Spanish only.
Correct, and that was.
And this one is only in English.
The second one is My Half Orange, A Story of Love and Language, is only in English.
Okay.
And Que Pinto Yo Aquí, which in English is Where Do I Fit In?
Oh yeah. Where do I fit in?
Where do I fit in? The story of, well, I guess a New Yorker in Never Never, in the Never Never City, because La Ciudad de Nunca Jamás is in English Never Never City, because La Tierra de Nunca Jamás is Never Never Land. So really they're about the same thing, but I would say that the English version of the book is, well, I know it's better. I spent more time on it. I refined it more closely. So, but it's about falling in love. It's about falling in love with a culture, with a language, with a woman, with discovering what it is to be a father. I never thought I would be a father, and now I'm a father, and my children are now 15.
That changes your life completely.
Changed my life completely. Changed my life completely. And I think the best books are about people whose lives have changed because of some
in a way that you never expected.
Exactly. Exactly, yeah. Miguel. I didn't expect when I started that I would be here. I never expected that I would never want to return home. I love it here, and I just everything I found great jobs, and I discovered this kind of ability that I have to communicate online. I mean, you have it too, but you know, I've got my Instagram account where I have a lot of followers, and
it is a huge, yeah.
Yeah. No, imagine, I mean, this is amazing, right? How this works. I mean, we've talked about this too, you and I, because suddenly your channel just exploded.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
All of a sudden. And you don't really know why. Well, it's the same with me. I mean, at the beginning of January, I had 1,500 followers on Instagram. Today, I have 305,000 followers. Now, partially that was because a guy there's an Instagram account called Club de Caballeros.
Okay.
And it's this guy who's got almost 1 million followers, and he made a post about people, how they should stop looking at tits and ass on Instagram, and they should start doing things where they can educate their minds. And he recommended 5 channels, and I was among
Be yours
those
one of
5
them.
channels. I was one of them.
Oh, and that's great.
Yeah. So someone was generous, and they mentioned my channel, and that began a momentum. And now I have, 305. I mean, from 1 month to the next, my Instagram account.
Yeah, it is crazy. Social media is crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And the good thing is that among the 300 and something, whatever, thousand people, I'm pretty much sure that you're helping a lot of people out of those, really helping them in their process of learning new language, getting more skills, and advancing in their own processes.
I hope so, Miguel. I mean, I enjoy doing it, and I try to find ideas that I can communicate quickly. I mean, there's no way my channel is different than yours, and I
love your contents, and in fact, this is not because you're here and we're talking, but I usually tell my audience to check your videos, because there's a lot to learn from your stuff, from your videos, and I don't have any trouble recommending them to go and watch your videos. It's because it's a very, very, very good material. I love it.
Thank you, Miguel. And your channel is more comprehensive. You offer programs for beginners. You have a very comprehensive idea. My channel is more like a complement to a channel like yours, because it's little ideas. They're kind of randomly chosen. I don't really direct my videos for any particular level. Some of them are for almost all the levels. I try to include I try to include something in every video for every level. Now, I think I speak too fast for beginners. And maybe because I put the Spanish and English
That's
in
great.
every
That's
video.
so great. Yeah.
Well, it's good, but I think, eventually students would want to graduate from my videos. Eventually, if they're learning English, they would not want to have the Spanish there. They would want to go to another teacher who teaches only in English, or another teacher who teaches only in Spanish. But my channel provides a certain type of information, especially for people who like to, when they're learning, compare and contrast structures. Because I'm always trying to put one language on top of the other, and very often I'm choosing words in both languages that to show people where the languages are parallel and where they're not. I think it's overrated to speak like a native speaker. I think that I'm always going to speak Spanish with an accent,
Yeah.
And you're always going to speak English with an accent, but you speak English, I would say, impeccably. And the fact that you have an accent has nothing to do with your English level.
That's
Zero.
something that sadly has been sold the wrong way to people, because marketing processes, the campaigns and whatever, in order to sell courses and methods, they always try to sell you the idea that you need to sound perfect, and
Yes.
perfect kills good.
Yes, and they'll
And
say
even
things
though
like-
I have my accent is the reflection of myself, my background, who am I, but it doesn't keep me from speaking from communicating
No.
in an effective way. So
No, in fact-
pronunciation versus accent, what could be more important? So, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, for example, you want to pronounce well. You pronounce perfectly, but that doesn't mean you don't have an accent. An accent doesn't mean pronouncing perfectly. I would say there are native speakers who speak like natives who pronounce badly. You can't understand them when they speak English because they don't pronounce their words correctly. They don't pronounce their words. They don't communicate with force and effort. I love English spoken with an accent. I love it. I prefer, in many ways, English spoken with an accent. In fact, if I hear someone speaking English with an accent, I admire them more, because that means they worked harder to get to where they are. Because, for example, my children are bilingual, but they cannot be admired for their Spanish and their English. They didn't work
It's
learn
it's
Spanish.
acquired.
They acquired it. They acquired it without work.
May I ask if they do they have the civilian accent? Most likely.
I think they do, yes, but I would say that it's probably modulated. Like, for example, they don't have a regional accent in English, and I think their accent in Andalus, right, is less because of their father. And also my wife makes an effort to, I mean, this is another thing about my story. It's like, I learned that if my children were going to be bilingual, I could not send them to preschool. They had to be with me. In other words, they stayed with me until they were 7 and 6 years old. I was with them every morning until 3 o'clock. Then my wife came home, and she was with them for the rest of the day. So I knew that if they were going to be bilingual, then I had to speak to them and teach them to read. I taught them to read, and I taught them to do math in English before they went to school. So this is super important, because if people talk about bilingual, I mean, if you want to be really, really specific with bilingual, I'm not bilingual. I am fluent in Spanish. My sons are bilingual because, for example, they can do math in both languages. It's impossible for me to do math in Spanish.
You need to think in English in order to do your math.
I have to translate the numbers, to do the calculations in my head. I can't do the, and this is actually an interesting fact. I don't know if I spoke
I
about
never
this
thought
in the
about that,
last-
but and it makes a lot of sense.
Yes, in fact, during World War II, there were a lot of people who spoke English perfectly.
Oh,
From
yeah, I remember.
Scandinavian countries.
There are movies about that, and
Yes, and so they would, so that to discover if these Scandinavian people were truly native speakers and to discover spies, they would make them do mathematical calculations out loud in English. And if they couldn't do the
complex
mathematical
calculations, not
Yeah.
just adding or subtracting.
exactly, and if they couldn't do it, that was a sign that they were not native speakers, and that's how they caught
That's
the spy.
so cool.
Isn't it cool?
It
Yeah.
is so cool. I never thought about that, and it makes a lot of sense. And
Yes,
it's
it does.
yeah.
I can't do
Oh,
it.
that's
For example,
awesome. So your children are bilingual.
They're bilingual. In fact, there's a
Cool.
funny story in one of the stories.
That's so cool.
that- yeah. For example, if I'm in a shop or I'm in a bar, and there's some confusion about change, if I say, "Well, I gave you €5, and the food was $4.63, and you gave me 37 cents in return," like if they start saying that to me in Spanish, I'm lost because I can't do the math. I have to
Okay.
translate it first to English to do the math. So they look at me like you can't, like they think like I'm stupid, and it's just not that. They don't understand that it's the last thing you learn to do in another language. I'll never be able to do simple arithmetic in Spanish. I have
Oh.
to translate it to my mother tongue. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
It's funny because now that you mention, I remember when I lived in the United States, the first time that I had to deal with numbers was paying, let's say, the bus fare, and
Right.
the change and everything, the currency, the different kinds of coins, because you had the quarters, you had the penny, the dime, and I was the nickel, and I was like trying to do that, and yeah, you're right. You need to move to Spanish in order to do the math and try to understand the mechanics of the numbers and the exchange and everything. I don't know. Now that you mentioned, that's something that I'm gonna do later, and I'm gonna try to do some math in English if I can. That's gonna be a very, very challenging exercise. And thanks for that.
You should do a video on it. You should
Yeah,
do a video on it.
I'm so excited right now because I never thought about that, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
I never thought about that, and it's so great. So I'm not sure if we're moving away from the idea of your projects and everything, but this subject is so interesting.
No, I don't. I mean, I just enjoy talking to you, and I think that
Me
if
too.
we want people to, I mean, look, seriously, Miguel, if we want people to, for people to follow me or to follow you or to buy my book, we just have to be interesting. That's all.
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about any of this stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, language learning is something that's fascinating. I mean, to me, it's interesting. Like, for example, like it seems to me like one of the things I want to do when I'm in the States is to do some videos for my channel on how reading helps people learn a language, because I think that's underrated for certain types of students. I feel as though, for example, I don't know what your opinion is on this, but for example, I'm not the type of person who can hear a song and listen to lyrics and very quickly learn the lyrics. Like, my wife is that type of person.
She learns the lyrics real quick.
She learns the lyrics really quickly. I can't do that. And I know this is a common thing, and I think this speaks toward a certain type of language learner. I think that the people who are capable of doing that, they learn with their ear. They don't really learn with their eyes. Okay? I'm a student who learns with his eyes. For me, for a word to stick in my head, I have to see it written down. I mean, eventually, it helps if I'm listening. Like, the ear plays an important part, but primarily I have to see the word.
Okay.
Then the hearing sort of plays a role. But for example, if you're the type of student like I am, then I think it's very, very important to read in the language that you're learning, and it's very, very important to love what you're reading. You have to love what you're reading. You can't just read anything, because you have to want to understand it. If you don't
to be
want
really
to
motivated to understand
have to
it,
be motivated.
yeah, and get involved with the whole thing, your imagination start to, yeah.
So, the reading can do two things. Number one, it can be a constant. I always recommend, like, if you're going to read a book, you should always read. You should read books with short chapters, and you should read them twice.
Are those that we call paperbacks?
Well,
not really.
Not really. I mean, a paperback is really a book that's like this. It's not a hardcover. It's just bendable.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
Okay. A hardcover is like this. This is a hardcover, like this.
Okay.
Book.
Okay.
Okay. So you have a hardcover, which is, and then you have the paperback. No, I just mean, it doesn't matter what type of book it is. The chapters have to be short. I would say between 1,500 and 2,000 words, and you read them. If you read them twice. And when you read twice, you don't look up any words. You're just reading really to review vocabulary and to wake up the subconscious. Because the first time you read it, you may not understand a word. But then the second time you read it, your subconscious is like, oh, now I understand that word.
In context.
Now, you have to have a certain level to do this. You have to have an intermediate level to do this. But with an intermediate level, you really should start to read in a foreign language. And then I always say, take one paragraph out of that chapter, and you underline every word you don't know, and you look it up, and you read it out loud to yourself. So you have to make it sort of like a mix of work and fun. You're reading because you want to read. You want to find out what it's teaching you, but you also have to convert it into a certain amount of work where you're reading it twice to really get the information, and then you're choosing a paragraph, a short paragraph, your favorite paragraph, and you're underlining every word you don't know, and you're reading it out loud. So it becomes a kind of didactic activity as well as being diversion. I mean, I really think reading is...
It's actually both.
Way. Excuse me?
It's actually both.
Yes.
Because you're having fun, you're learning, and you're making pretty much a class out of it.
Yes, you are. And you're learning in sort of, you're self-teaching yourself, which is something that I think is, I'm self-taught in Spanish. You mentioned at the beginning of the video that you're probably going to make mistakes. Of course, I'll probably make mistakes in my English in this video. In my English. And I'm a native speaker.
Oh, yeah. We native speakers always make mistakes. Always.
In our language, very often people, like, I'm sure you get this yourself, but there are the haters who will, for example, pick out the errors that I make in my videos in Spanish.
That happens.
And
how come you're there teaching English if you barely speak, blah, blah, blah. That's...
It's unfair.
That's sad.
It's sad, and it shows those people have a very little idea of how to learn languages.
And what's the idea behind learning another language? It's not just for showing off.
Yes,
you're learning.
You know this. Yes, you know that very often you'll make mistakes, and you'll know it's wrong. It's not as though you don't understand. Like, for example, today someone said to me in a video, John, it's not por si caso, it's por si acaso. Now, I know that, but when I'm speaking quickly,
it goes
wrong, and I swallow a syllable, and so, there has to be, this is something people often have to face their shame and their embarrassment of, being corrected, because very often there's a way to correct people that's generous, and there's a way to correct people that's
in
arrogant.
A destructive way.
There's an instructive way. Yeah. And there's something that you can sometimes see in certain people. They don't know how to correct.
Especially if they want specifically to go public on the correction they're making. Because sometimes what I do is, if I see something like that, what I do is I send an inbox message.
Sure.
Just not to make the whole thing like public and just, hey. And in fact, I received an email from a guy the other day, an English native speaker, because I recently started a channel trying to teach Spanish to English speakers.
A great idea.
And I used the word exposition, and he sent me a letter saying, it's cool, blah, blah, blah. Be careful because perhaps you mean exposure. And I was like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. Oh, thank you.
Sure.
I'll keep that in mind because, yeah, I used to say, you need more exposition to the language, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to say, you need more exposure.
Sure. Those are very hard words, man, to remember. Yeah, I mean, that's great. You know, sometimes people can help you. Very often, I have, you're one of them, where I don't really, if I don't know the word in Spanish, sometimes it's very, very difficult for me to come up with the correct word, and I need to have friends who can help me, and you're one of my friends in that regard. If I need help on Spanish, I can say, well, and also you have the added skill to relate it to English, and that sort of, I like to learn with both languages in mind, which may not be the best advice for language learners, because I don't know if you should learn with both languages in mind, but as a teacher, I like to learn with both languages in mind because it makes me a better teacher. Maybe it makes the learning of the language more difficult. I wouldn't suggest that you think about both languages all the time when you're learning a new language. Eventually, if you're learning English, you want to let the Spanish go.
Yeah.
And if you're learning Spanish, you want to let the English go. But I don't think you and I ever want to let either language go because we're depending on the context, of course. If we're in the bank, yes, but I'm always teaching and thinking about how can I compare and contrast these two languages.
I think that helps a lot in order to understanding.
Yes.
The relationships, and that helps you also that helps you in order to learn how to think different, because you need to think different.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, getting back to my projects, one of the things I'd like to do is I have this new website, which is mainly in place for the book. But before that, and in order to give a context to the whole thing, are those new projects of yours related to teaching or basically writing and the other thing? It's a good question. I mean, I think that the reason why teaching English is easy for me is because I spent so many years working with the language closely by writing. So I understand how it works. I understand how it works grammatically. And then also when I made that promise to myself that I wasn't going to read or write in English for 5 years. Okay? Of course, as you say, I wrote emails to my family in English, but my daily habits of writing
were basically in Spanish.
Art form or reading for fun were all in Spanish. And these things made me very, very aware of how the language works. So I think that the teaching of languages is really an offshoot of my writing. Now,
when you say offshoot, you mean?
Like un brote.
Okay.
Like
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So it like shoots off. Dispara fuera.
A branching?
Yeah, exactly. And so everything I think is an offshoot of the writing. So my idea is that if someone really wants to learn English, and someone really wants and is also interested in books, well then they can go to my Book Ranch channel and they can practice their listening. Because I make an effort on all of my YouTube videos, on the subtitles, to make sure that they're correct English. I go over them very, very precisely. So every word that I say, they're seeing on the bottom of the screen.
How many videos so far in that channel?
How many do I have?
How many videos? Yeah.
I think it's something like 65.
Have you thought about maybe creating a podcast out of that content?
I do.
Because the other day I was talking to a friend who lives in Barcelona, and he told me that there's a lot of people hungry for podcasts.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I mean, I guess you could call it a podcast. There is a section what I call conversations, where I speak to writers and we have hour-long conversations similar to this. But I always make sure that they're together. I don't do it by Zoom. I sit down with them and we at a park, at a picnic table, and we talk.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I guess that's part of it. But really, look, Miguel, I'm 55 years old. I have my passions. My passions are books and language, and I want all of my projects to revolve around
that. Yeah.
Revolve around that.
We're on the same page. Yeah.
Yes, and if maybe people will follow me because of my language teaching, and maybe other people will follow me because they're readers, and maybe other people will follow me because of my books, and I'm just not trying to market myself. I mean, I'm just putting out into the world what I love. I mean, I had this moment where I just said to myself, I reached a certain age and I said, at this point in my life, I just have to start producing more content than I consume. I just have to. Okay. I watch a lot of videos. I feel like I communicate well. I want to produce content. Okay. I want to show people the books that I love and why I love them. I want to teach people about the languages that I love and how they work and how to speak them better. And I want to express myself on the page with as much precision and art as I possibly can to express what I think are the most meaningful moments in my life. And that's it, man. And, the friends I make along the way, like you. And, I mean, look, if it weren't for these channels that I'm doing, I wouldn't have met you.
Yeah.
I really admire you.
We wouldn't have met.
We wouldn't have met. And there's a lot of people who I've met through my Book Ranch channel. There's a visitor came to Seville the other day who started following me back in 2019. He lives in North Carolina. He came to Seville. He reached out. We had a beer. I mean, these are beautiful moments in life. Unforgettable moments.
Yeah.
I mean, look at you. Did you ever expect to have 100,000 followers on YouTube?
Not really.
Right?
No, not really. This began as an exercise in order to see if I could get to the point of monetizing the channel in certain time frame, following somebody else's directions. That was it. It was like, this is a method. Let's try it, and in the meantime, let's share knowledge. I think that knowledge is perhaps the one thing that you don't lose by sharing it. In fact, it improves when you share it, because you need to learn more and be more aware of it if you want to convey it properly, to share it properly. So that's an interesting thing.
No, I love that. I hope your listeners remember that line. It's a great line. Knowledge is one of the few things you don't lose by sharing.
By sharing it, not really.
No,
you don't lose anything. You don't lose anything. It's just the moment that you spend sharing it, and it can help greatly a lot of people.
Yes, it does.
That you don't even know, that you don't even expect. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing when you think from the perspective of being transcendent.
Yeah.
Somehow that's interesting to be able to help people, even if you don't mean it. Well, not you don't mean it, if you don't know it, because you mean to help people, right?
Yeah.
So
it's just.
I'm gonna go ahead.
Continue.
I was going to tell you that. So you recently opened your website. Do you keep track on the visits, or you don't really care about that? You just want to keep your posts and everything related to book rants, to Spanglish in a minute.
Right. I mean, I want it to be a kind of headquarters. You know, people can find it. They can discover certain things. I also have what's called a Substack account.
What's that?
It's a Substack. It's an interesting social network. You might be interested in it because it's a kind of newsletter.
Oh, okay.
Basically, people sign up to it, and they sign up with their email address, and you send out updates, and you remind people. And I have this.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed when I went to your website was the newsletter thing, the feature of the newsletter, and I was thinking, as far as I remember, in order to have a newsletter, you needed to either purchase a plan for being able to send massive emails and messages and this and that. I was thinking, oh, this is a great tool for John, because with having over 300,000 followers on Instagram, most likely you're gonna have a lot of traffic on your website, and then most likely a percentage of that people is going to subscribe to your newsletter. You are going to need a very robust method of sending those newsletters.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a great new social network because of that reason.
Substack.
I mean, Substack, you previously had to buy a newsletter platform. Now Substack is a free newsletter platform.
Oh, okay, yeah, I remember.
It's free.
Because back then you needed to use MailChimp, but you needed to pay. There was some other that I can't remember right now. I did something like that when I used to work as a webmaster for other companies. Now that I don't do that anymore, but that brought my attention. Is that correct? It caught my attention.
There you go.
Yeah, it caught my attention. Like, oh, this is so cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I do that. Right now. I'm not. I should probably do that more. Really, it's just a way for people to, because you know how the social networks work. I mean, I have.
Who knows? That's so crazy. But you really don't know. It's like, I know that I need to do these things, but you never know when the whole thing is going to grow in ways that you never expected.
And also, I have almost 130,000 followers on Facebook, 300,000 followers on Instagram.
That's a lot of people. Congratulations.
Thank you. But the only way that my content reaches all those people is if I pay. In other words, the thing is, I have 300,000 followers on Instagram, but if I put a post up, that's only reaching 1/10 of my followers.
Yeah, I've seen that.
In other words, those followers are great because, people look at that and it's a certain cachet. Like, wow, he's got 300,000 followers. But I have to pay for my content to reach them, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just not. So I think that Substack is a way to sort of skip or avoid the algorithm. If people
very smart.
Yeah, if people want to see my material, if they really want to see it and they want to be reminded of it, well then I'll send a newsletter every month telling them about my videos, and they'll be reminded of, like, oh look, new stuff has appeared on Instagram, and they can watch
Let's go check.
five different videos I've done since the last time they saw something, or they can see the video that I did on. I mean, you should think about it, because I saw on your channel you do a lot of different things on your channel. Like, you do a lot of different things, so you could send every month or every 2 weeks, this is my new podcast, and inside the newsletters,
the monthly update.
You can send an embedded video, so they can watch the video right inside the Substack thing.
Okay, so I'll take a look. I'll take a look. I think maybe later I might have room for that, but if not today, tomorrow I'm gonna check that. Certainly,
check it out, man.
Certainly,
it might help.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really that. It's a headquarters for my stuff, and I hope to continue. I'm going to continue everything. That was going
to be my closing question, because we're kind of over the hour right now. What comes for John Julius Reel?
Well, I'm just going to continue doing my videos.
looking forward to making more videos like this.
Well, me too. I mean, we have another one planned, but also, you know, I want to continue producing my short videos. I want to continue producing my book rants or my book reviews, and I want to publish more books. I mean, my specialty on both book rants and what I write are memoirs. Now, memoir in Spanish are like novelas autobiográficas. So I write about myself, and I love writing about myself.
It's funny because I don't know. You correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't want to say memorias.
No, because it's interesting. The word novel in English implies fiction, but novela in Spanish could be fiction or non-fiction.
And that was what I was going to tell you, because I know that I've heard a lot the word memorias making reference to a book like that.
Yes, it's funny because...
So it is okay if you say memorias.
In Spanish.
In Spanish, yeah. You can
Really?
say libro autobiográfico, but also memorias.
Okay.
I've heard that a lot.
Okay. Well, yeah, then I say novelas autobiográficas because it's really a story. I'm not telling my life story. I'm telling about a specific aspect of my life.
Yep.
My years in Seville. And
Yep.
the other memorias or other novelas autobiográficas are going to be about other aspects of my life. But yeah, man, I'm just going to continue doing what I love.
Well, looking forward to seeing more of you always. I really enjoy and like and love your channel, your work, your videos. I'm always learning something every day, and I think stuff like yours should be more out there, available to more people.
Thank you.
So, as I told you a few minutes ago, knowledge is something that we don't lose by sharing it, and we are on the same page when it comes to that. So I think great things are coming for both of us. So, John, thanks a lot for being here with us today, and looking forward to making another video. We have some ideas pending, and have fun and keep on sharing great stuff with everybody.
Miguel, it's a pleasure to be with you, man. A pleasure and an honor.
¿Qué tal les fue con la entrevista? Espero que hayan entendido la mayoría, si no todo. Espero que hayan sacado provecho, vocabulario, expresiones, una cantidad de cosas, pronunciaciones, estructuras. Hay mucho de qué sacar, y es un ejercicio no solamente para escucharlo una vez, es un ejercicio que se puede hacer muchas veces, se puede tomar por segmentos. En fin, hay mucho que hacer, y quizá más adelante tome apartes de este video para hacer ejercicios para ustedes de ese tipo. Si tienen dudas a medida que van haciendo esto, por favor miren el video cuantas veces sea necesario para que ustedes mismos hagan el esfuerzo por escuchar, entender. Si tienen aún así dudas, ya saben que me dan un comentario y yo estaré respondiendo en el menor tiempo posible. Recuerden también, si les ha gustado este video, darle like, compartir con todos sus amigos y en todos sus grupos, y si aún no lo han hecho, suscríbanse al canal, denle click a la campanita. Si las personas que son suscriptoras ya saben que pueden participar en los chats en vivos, estarán al día con todos estos contenidos que estamos compartiendo constantemente. Estamos haciendo muchos contenidos, y de paso siguen colaborándonos con el crecimiento del canal para que sigamos llegando a mucha más gente. Para mí, para John, ha sido un placer haber hecho esta entrevista. Tenemos pendientes, creo, un par más que vamos a hacer para traerles más material. Y bueno, espero que sigan disfrutando estos materiales. Nos vemos en un próximo video. Bye bye.